All right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. As usual, we're going to start with some announcements. Then we have our recommended reading. It's a very special one for tonight. Our affirmation of the day, introductions and victories. We'll do an audiobook excerpt from chapter 4. We'll have our topic discussion. We'll take a break at about 8:45 or so, and then we'll come back to work on our assignment, questions and answers, and we'll wrap it up by 9:30. Just a reminder that tonight's workshop is being recorded, and it will be available on the BeBiggerToday.com website and YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. Please feel free to stop your video and mute your microphone if you do not wish to be seen or heard on the recording. I have author-signed paperbacks. Get a discount, 20% off, by using the code BOOK20 at checkout at bebiggertoday.com/book. This is a limited time offer that just seems to go on and on and on, but take advantage of it while you can. I only have a few of these left. And I'm happy to sign the book to whoever you like. Great holiday gift for the people that you love. My book, New York Cityscapes, collaboration with 6 other New York City photographers, is the definitive NYC photography book. Get your copy at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. Original photos of the New York City skyline and landmarks that have made this city famous. And you get the point of view from 6 different photographers. 7 different photographers, including myself. So get it today at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. It's on sale for $16.95. I will sign that book as well. Audiobook. Yes, I'm still working on it. Available for pre-order at $9.99, unabridged. It's going to be close to 10 hours. You can order your copy at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. And on both the paperback and the audiobook, they come with a full money-back guarantee. If you don't love it, just let me know. I'll send you your money back, but I know you're going to love it. And we have merch, hats and t-shirts, great stocking stuffers for the holidays. Save 20% at bebiggertoday.com/merch. And check out my original fine art. These are original limited edition prints of my photos. They're professionally framed, signed by me. We have all different sizes and framing options available. And I'm going to play a little commercial now. Peter's photos and abstract designs are uniquely beautiful, one-of-a-kind works of art. These gallery-wrapped canvas prints are set in a contemporary shadow box floating frame and will enhance the beauty of any home or office. Available in 4 different sizes, each piece is professionally framed and comes complete and ready to hang. Frames are available in your choice of black, white, or brown, and each is signed by the artist. Peter's original art and photography will make a great gift for a client, for yourself, or someone you love. Order yours today. And we have NYC refrigerator magnets. These are the perfect stocking stuff for the holidays. These are my original photos on refrigerator magnets. And again, if you have the book, when we get to chapter 7, you're going to find out the significance and the relation to forgiveness of these refrigerator magnets. Get them today at bebiggertoday.com/merch. Finally, I'm available for one-on-one coaching and or corporate consulting. If you're a creative person, a writer, photographer, artist, or just a regular person who wants to be bigger than you think you are, reach out to me. I'm available to work with you one-on-one, or if you work for a company or own a company and you'd like me to speak to your management team, your sales team, your human resources department, just let me know. We'll set that up. All right, tonight's recommended reading. So this book, Autobiography of a Yogi, perhaps you've heard of it, perhaps you've read it. This book was first published in 1946, and it tells the story of Paramhansa Yogananda and his life as a yogi in India. And I've listened to this book many, many times now, and it's just a fascinating, it's truly what the book says, an autobiography of a yogi. It talks about all his mystical experiences. It talks about the saints in India, and his experience, his spiritual awakening, his experience with mystical, spiritual happenings and events. Just a really fascinating book. Now, he came to the U.S., I think, in the 1920s, and he established the Self-Realization Fellowship. And there are at least three chapters now. There's one in Los Angeles, one up by San Francisco, and another one south in Orange County. And when I lived in Los Angeles, I used to go there all the time. It's the Self-Realization Fellowship in Los Angeles is just beautiful. It's on Pacific Coast Highway, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, this book is life-changing, has been life-changing for a lot of people. I highly recommend it. It's a long read. It's about 500 pages, so if you're into audiobooks, that might be a better way to experience it. You won't be, if you have any interest in spirituality or metaphysics or anything like that. And the interesting thing about Paramhansa Yogananda is when he finally left his body for the last time, when he made his transition, the mortuary in Hollywood, California, which was the mortuary for all the big Hollywood stars and music stars and all of that, they handled the body. And they reported that over the course of 10 days, there was no decomposition whatsoever of his body. And in fact, it smelled like lavender. So this guy was on a very high vibrational level to the point where he was not affected. Even after death, his body was not affected by worldly conditions. I just offer that just as an interesting little side note. So again, I highly recommend this book. And you can, if you want to purchase it, you can get it on Amazon and every place else. You can, as I said, Audible has it as an audiobook. Highly recommended. All right, tonight's affirmation. I am on my own side. Now, this may not seem like much, but I've talked about how, for me, part of my journey has been going from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. And so this is apropos for me because for a long time, and even sometimes as recently as this afternoon, I found I've been working against myself. You know, I can be hard on myself, I can be impatient with myself, I can be very demanding of myself, I can be very shaming and negative of myself if I'm not doing what I think I'm supposed to do in the way that I think I'm supposed to do it. So being on our own side, you know, for me at least, that's an important part of the puzzle. So I offer this as an affirmation when you're doing the dishes or walking the dog or whatever you might be doing. You know, just remember this and just remind yourself, I am on my own side. All right, so this is an opportunity for people who are new to introduce themselves, or for people who have been here who want to share a victory from the past week. So is there anyone who would like to say hi or share a victory with us?
Hi,
Kim?
Peter. It's Kim.
Hi.
Just saying hi.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Hi, Peter. I'd like to share a victory.
Please.
Hello, everyone. I signed up for and have participated in 2 watercolor classes. This is way over the top in terms of me addressing things that are scary, hard, I'm not good at, quote unquote, all those things, you know, and I've enjoyed the 2 classes. So fearlessly, courageously.
Awesome. That's great. Good for you, Cynthia. Woohoo! Who else?
Thank you.
So let's jump in with our topic for tonight. Still working on chapter 4, from FEAR to LOVE. We're actually going to spend a few more weeks in this chapter. There's a lot here. We'll start with tonight's audiobook excerpt. If you have a copy of the book, we're going to be starting on page 108. And I think it's about a 6.5-minute excerpt, so we'll be back. True romance. I'm not sure if what I'm about to say is good news or not. I'll let you decide for yourself. If it's true the reason we feel bad in relationships is because of how we see ourselves, then it must also be true that we feel good in relationships for the same reason. Let me explain. As I've been saying for the better part of this book, no one and nothing makes us feel anything, good or bad. All our emotions originate within us. We're always reacting to the meaning we give a particular situation based on our internal filtering process. This means the head over heels, I can't wait to eat Jell-O while wearing her socks state of mind is probably more about us than them. Like the fact that we're the primary source of our misery when a relationship ends, we're also the main source of our joy when things are good. The reason this may be good news is we really don't need anyone else liking us to feel good in relationships. Conceivably, at least, we could generate these feelings within ourselves. However, sadly, that's not the way things usually work. We'll almost always seek outside ourselves for a reason to feel the way we do. Just like we blame others when we feel bad, we blame that special someone when we feel good. Yet in both cases, no one makes us feel anything. We're always and only reacting to our own ideas about ourselves. Now, and this is probably more bad than good on the news front, what we're feeling in those situations when we think things are good is most likely not what I would call true love. We know this intuitively, which is why we call it infatuation, chemistry, and so on. But regardless of the label, I would submit that in many situations, our positive emotional reactions are grounded in the fact that we think someone special likes us. Someone special liking us, in turn, must mean that we're special too. That's what feels so good. Seeing ourselves as special and feeling good as a result is the domain of the ego. In Chapter 6, we'll talk in depth about the ego. For now, note that we all have one, and that perceiving ourselves as special is what the ego is all about. The problem is most of us are unaware, or worse, just don't care, when we're being run by our ego. We're hoping those intense feelings of attraction are love, or at least that they'll lead to it sometime soon. While it's possible there is true love underlying the rush of chemistry, it's not very likely. This is because, in addition to being insecure, the ego is also, not surprisingly, egocentric. The ego only gives in an attempt to get something back. Accordingly, its primary concern is what that hottie can do for us in terms of proving we're more special than anyone else. If getting is the ego's primary motivation, when the getting stops, negative emotions quickly follow. Most people feel negative feelings when they think something has been taken away from them. Watch 2 or more 5-year-olds play for any amount of time and you'll soon see this in action. Thus, when a relationship ends and we feel anger, self-pity, despair, jealousy, and so on, the ego is reacting to the idea that it is now being deprived of something it wants. The ego always blames someone or something outside itself for any loss and directs its displeasure accordingly. Some people will dispute they only give to others in order to get something back. While I agree it's true many of us do act selflessly and for the benefit of others at times, the key is to notice when we feel angry because other people don't recognize or reciprocate our good deeds. If we feel resentful because someone doesn't appreciate what we've done for them, this is usually a good sign we're giving to get back. Some will also say it's only fair for people to reciprocate when we've done something nice for them. Each person needs to decide for themselves what's fair, but I will say true love is only concerned with what it can give, not with what it can get back. For the ego, it's just the opposite. Another attribute of true love is that, like true happiness, it never fades of its own accord. We may abandon either or both true love or true happiness, but they never abandon us. This means falling in and then out of love with someone is a misnomer. If we truly love someone, that feeling never fades. We may no longer choose to be in relationship with that person for any number of reasons, but the emotion we would call true love remains. While feelings of anger or despair may seem normal when someone leaves us, especially in what we consider a cruel or thoughtless way, this only tells us we may have been more interested in getting from them rather than giving to that person. Yes, it's okay to divorce ourselves, pun intended, when other people are acting inappropriately. But as we'll discuss later, we don't need to feel angry to do that. And even if we do need to be firm in setting a boundary in the moment, harboring years of resentment against them may reveal something other than true love as one's primary motivation for getting involved with that person in the first place. I'm guessing more than a few people will be unhappy with my description of romantic love. Actually, I don't have to guess. Some people have already shared their displeasure with me. In response, I can say I'm not particularly happy about all this myself. Yet, short of illness and death, I can't think of anything that creates more pain and anguish in many people's lives than the turmoil of their romantic relationships. In case you're still thinking I've gotten all this wrong, recall how your first marriage started and how it ended. The value people feel as adults is directly related to the value they felt as children. This is why it's crucial to instill a sense of self-worth in our kids while they're young. There's nothing more important, not what school you send them to or what you put in their lunchbox every day, than building a child's sense of self-esteem. How we treat young children day after day is what teaches them whether or not they're lovable. The more valuable we feel inside as kids, the less we'll seek a sense of value and specialness outside of us when we're adults. All the education in the world can't compensate for a child's lack of self-esteem. I know many people these days are worried we're overesteeming our children. Those little plastic trophies for the last place field hockey team notwithstanding, it's how we interact with our kids on a daily basis that forms their sense of worth. Regularly shaming, blaming, or scapegoating them will impact them much more than giving them trophies or not. This is made even worse when one minute we're telling them we love them, and the next minute yelling at them for getting handprints all over the refrigerator. I personally don't think it's possible to overesteem a child. Telling them, and more importantly, acting as if they are valuable and important to us, won't make them less able to cope with life. A sense of entitlement and self-centeredness only comes from people who lack self-esteem and are trying to compensate for it. People who are full of themselves in a positive, healthy way only want to give of their abundance. These are the people who do great things in the world. All right, if you were trying to follow along in the book, I think this is one of those sections that I did some revising on, so it may have been difficult to track that. I apologize, but now you know what the second edition is going to sound like. All right, so there's a couple of interesting points that came up in the audiobook tonight that I want to discuss. And I made reference to the ego. We're going to talk a lot about the ego in Chapter 6. People have been talking about the ego for centuries. I think maybe it was started with Plato or Aristotle or whatever, but this idea that there's a part of us that is running a lot of our behavior, and it's not, and our thinking and our interacting with other people and all of that, and it's not always the most functional or the most loving or the most healthy part of the mind. The ego, just going to give you a little preview right now. Our ego has its basis in our evolution as a species, and it was the part of us that kept us alert to danger, the part of us that kept us hypervigilant, the part of us that had us protecting ourselves and our clan and our family and all of that. So it had a value in terms of the evolution of the species. But I would argue, and I think it's become clear to a lot of people, that part of our mind that ran us for so many centuries or millennia is not really serving us in many ways, and it kind of goes against a lot of the spiritual principles that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to say a lot more about it later, but it comes up in the context of romantic relationships because there's actually three things that are important to know about when we're in our ego. The ego is a part of us that's selfish, it's a part of us that seeks specialness, and it's a part of us that's egocentric, not surprisingly. And so let's look at this first slide. I actually left the selfish part out, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. So one of the reasons, I can only speak for myself, but I noticed this as I was working on the book, when I look back at a lot of my romantic relationships in particular, but also some of my work relationships, I could see that I really wanted to distinguish myself in certain ways, or I really wanted to feel special, and I wanted somebody else to make me feel special. Now, we've talked a lot about in the previous workshops and earlier in the book that nobody makes us feel anything. So I'll come back to that point in a minute. But I was seeking out partners who I thought would validate the fact that I was special. I was seeking out jobs or clients that I thought would validate that in some way I was better than other photographers or better than other lawyers or whatever I was doing. So it's the ego's need for specialness that was driving my decision making. And along with specialness is this better than, seeing myself as better. And obviously that created a lot of problems in my life, which I'll talk more about. The second point I want to make about the ego right now is the ego is egocentric, which means, when we're in our egoic thinking, we take everything personally. We make everything that happens about us. Especially if it's coming from another person. So we take everything personally, we make everything about us, and that becomes the basis of our justified anger, of our annoyance, of our retaliation, of our withholding our love, of judging and criticizing other people or situations. Going to talk all about judgment later, and so on. So this is a function of the ego, and then the last part is the selfishness, where, selfishness is just what it sounds like. Now, here's the thing. I've had to learn in my own life and my own recovery from codependence the difference between selfishness and self-care. And putting myself first is not actually being selfish. Putting myself first in a situation, it can mean that what I'm doing is taking care of myself. So by taking care of myself, then I can be available, I can be present, and I can really be of service to another person or a situation or whatever. So self-care, good. Selfish, probably not so good. Now, what is selfish? Selfish is really acting to the detriment of somebody else, taking advantage of somebody else, ignoring somebody else's needs, creating a situation where we're not really thinking of somebody else's well-being in a situation where that would be warranted or appropriate. So these are the characteristics of the ego. Now, when I drag all of this stuff into a romantic relationship, good luck. I mean, it's just, this speaks to the fact that, for me personally, I didn't have a clue when I would get involved, especially when I was younger. It was, the bottom line was, it was all about what I could get from the relationship, what I could get from the other person, and how I could manage to give as little as possible in return. I'm not proud of this, and this was not an enlightened way of living, and I have since really had to look at the way I do relationships, and I've, for those of us who know the 12 steps, I've worked the steps around these issues. I've made amends to the persons I had harmed through my behavior. So I feel actually pretty clean with it, but I can see now that, this egoic thinking dominated my interactions, my relationships, especially my romantic relationships, but again, also some work relationships, friendships, and so on. So I'm bringing all this to our attention, again, this is to raise our awareness, to raise our consciousness, because we can't change who we are, or we can't change how we see ourselves if we're not aware of what we're currently doing. And we're not aware of the programming that's running our lives, that's running our minds. Now, again, the ego is not necessarily a bad thing. As I said, especially early on in our evolution as a species, it was good to be selfish. It was good to be really on alert, to be making sure that we put ourselves first and, have some level of suspicion or hypervigilance or awareness about the other tribes or other clans that we were interacting with. But I think it's kind of worn out its welcome. Now, as I said, we're going to talk a lot more about this in Chapter 6. I just wanted to introduce the concept here. Let's take a look at the next slide. So as I mentioned in the audiobook, a lot of us can mistake those feelings of infatuation, chemistry, great sex, desire, obsession for love. And while all of that is great and all of that feels great, in my experience at least, it's not the same thing. Now, it may lead to that, but then again, it may not, and it probably won't for a number of reasons, which we may not talk about this week, but we'll get into next week. So it's just to begin to be aware that, there's nothing wrong with those great feelings, those feelings of chemistry, but as long as we're aware of the limitations, we're aware of what's really going on, and understanding that, for me at least, again, if the basis of me entering into a relationship is to see what I can get from that relationship, as opposed to what I can give to the relationship, that's going to have a real impact on how that relationship goes. And when I see myself as unlovable, when I see myself as not good enough, I mentioned this last week, then I am going to do what I have to do to mitigate. My thought was in many of those situations, even in business relationships, that when they found out who I really was, when they got to really know me, when they got to see me in action, they weren't going to like me, and they were going to leave me, or there's going to be some negative consequence to that. So my protection, my way of insulating myself from those experiences was, to have this, it was a defensive posture. There wasn't a lot of intimacy in those relationships. Let me say that. There wasn't a lot of honesty. There wasn't a lot of warm, personal, it was really trying to get, as I said, trying to get as much as I could and give up as little as I had to stay in the relationship. So, and again, this comes back to, who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? Because the problem was not the situation. The problem was how I saw myself as a person. The problem was how I saw myself in terms of whether or not I was really lovable, in my imperfections, in my shortcomings, in my limitations. And would that be acceptable to somebody else? The problem was I didn't accept my own shortcomings, my own limitations, and all of that, which meant I couldn't imagine that anybody else could. So this kind of leads us to the next slide, I think. Let's see what this one is. Well, not really, but I like this slide. So true love, which is different from infatuation, chemistry, and all of that, is about giving rather than getting. And what I like here is it's also about forgiving rather than forgetting. Now, I'm sure I'm not the first person that ever put it that way, but that's what came to me today when I was working on this. And it's been clear to me that if I really want to see who I am in that relationship, how willing am I to give? How willing am I? And it's not necessarily, I don't want to give to the point where I feel resentful. That's not what this is about. It's giving it an appropriate way from a place of love, from a place of compassion, from a place of wanting to share with another person, from that place of intimacy, which is, and giving could be just being accepting of somebody else's shortcomings, accepting of somebody else's limitations, forgiving somebody when they make a mistake. If I can't forgive me for my own mistakes, it's going to be very difficult for me to forgive somebody else for their mistakes. And I can become very critical and judgmental, and that's all just a projection of how I see myself, how I feel about myself. So I talk a lot about, again, later in this chapter and later in the book, about self-love, self-forgiveness. Until I give myself those things, it's going to be very hard for me to trust somebody in another relationship, because I can't trust another person in a relationship because I can't trust myself. I can't trust myself to be nice to myself. I can't trust myself to love myself when I least like who I'm being. We'll see next week that that's my definition of unconditional love, one of the definitions. Being willing to love myself or another person when we least like who they're being. Think about that. So now again, we're talking about moving from fear. We started this chapter with fear, F-E-A-R. We're talking about making the move from fear to love. But I mentioned last week that the only way we can make that transition is by addressing our fear of love. It's our fear of love that creates a lot of the dysfunction in our relationships. So again, my fear of love is, afraid that I can't trust another person to be nice to me if I make a mistake, to accept me when I show them the worst of me, to have compassion for my shortcomings, my limitations, my flaws, my imperfections. So now, this is obviously easier said than done, and the only way I can really do this, there's two things I have to do. Number one, I have to give those things to myself. So I have to be forgiving of myself. I have to love myself when I least like who I'm being. But number two is I also have to take care of myself. I have to know how to take care of myself in my relationships with other people. And I mentioned this briefly, I've actually mentioned it a bunch of times over the last few weeks, this idea of having healthy boundaries. The primary way that I take care of myself in my relationships with another person is by having healthy boundaries. Now, again, I keep saying this, boundaries are not what most people think they are. We're going to talk all about this when we get to chapter 6 and 7. But I want to say here, see, I can't accept somebody else's shortcomings or limitations or imperfections if those shortcomings, limitations, or imperfections are negatively impacting me. So if somebody's actually being inappropriate in the relationship, if they're being dishonest or if they're being controlling or manipulative or if they're being condescending or, this is not about loving them no matter what. Loving another person doesn't mean that we stop loving ourselves. So if somebody is acting inappropriately, it may be appropriate for me to set some boundaries, to have a conversation about it, to say, hey, this is not okay when you do this. That's not working for me. But the difference is when I have healthy boundaries, when I know how to take care of myself, when I see myself in that relationship as somebody who can take care of himself, then I don't have to use things like anger to protect myself. I don't have to use things like defensiveness or being judgmental or being critical as a way to take care of myself in that relationship with the other person. So it's only when I know how to take care of myself, when I know how to have healthy boundaries, that I can actually approach someone when they're being inappropriate, when they've made a mistake that's had negative consequences for me, when I can approach them in a functional, healthy, loving way. If I haven't done all those things, then I'm going to react with anger. And they're going to be defensive, and I'm going to be angry, and I'm going to be defensive, and they're going to be angry, and I'm going to be judgmental, and I'm going to be critical, and they're going to be angry, and they're going to be critical. And, welcome to my love life. So, by changing who I think I am, how I see myself, by taking, this was chapter 2, so important, by taking responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions in every situation and with every person, instead of my knee-jerk response being blaming you for how I feel, say, no, it's not about them, it's about me, and it's how I see myself in the situation that's causing my reaction. It's not what they're doing or not doing. Very hard to get this, guys. I mean, the last 3 days have been so hard for me because I want to blame other people. I mean, there's been stuff going on. It's been like one thing after another. And I'm so convinced that it's somebody else's fault that I feel the way I feel. And I wrote this damn book, it's like I can't go there. I can't do that. I know that that's not true. Again, I'm not making excuses for somebody else's inappropriate behavior. All right? I'm not condoning somebody else's, bad behavior. But they're still not responsible for how I feel. They're not responsible for what I think, feel, say, or do. Now, actually don't have another slide, so we'll take a few more minutes, then we'll take our break. What I mentioned in the audiobook tonight was this idea that if nobody makes us feel bad in relationships, then the truth is nobody makes us feel good in relationships either. You know, so that head over heels in love feeling that I have is probably when I'm with somebody new or in, whatever that ideal relationship, it's probably more about me than it is about them. Now, again, I'm not saying true love is not possible. I'm not saying it's not, we can't have intense feelings of joy and affection and warm personal regard for other people. I'm not saying none of that exists or none of that's real. But I am saying that I'm responsible for how I feel. And if nobody has the power to make me feel bad, then nobody has the power to make me feel good either. And in both cases, I'm probably just blaming somebody else for how I feel. Now that's potentially good news in the sense that I don't have to be in a relationship to feel joyful, to feel ecstatic, to feel loved. But I probably, at least I'll speak for myself, I have not really matured to the point where I can just generate those feelings on demand. I'm still projecting onto somebody else. And I can see now that, as I said in the audiobook tonight, it's, for me at least, when the ego kicks in that situation, it's the ego. Our ego loves to feel special. And so what I have done in my life is I've projected onto another person that they're special, they're attractive, or they're successful, or there's something about them that makes them better than other people. And if they're better than other people and they like me, then I must be better than other people too. If I must be special. And the ego loves that. The ego lives for that. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does become, for me, it's a red flag, and it becomes the basis of a dysfunctional relationship, because what happens when I think that they don't like me anymore? Or they're unhappy with me, or I've done something that's upset them. Not that I have the power to upset anybody. Well, then what happens? Well, now all of a sudden, my good feelings about myself go out the window, because the person who I think is giving me my specialness because they're special and they like me, now all of a sudden, if I think they don't like me, I don't really know, but if I think they don't like me, now all of a sudden, I don't feel so good about myself, or I don't feel so good in general. And I may become resentful of them, I may want to control them, I may become critical of them. And none of that is about true love. None of that is about true intimacy. None of that is about a functional, healthy, intimate relationship. Now, I may just be an extreme case, guys. I don't know. I'm not speaking for anybody else but myself in all of this. But I have had these experiences when, in hindsight, looking back, I can see, I really went into that relationship with first of all, a very distorted sense of expectations of the other person. I went in with an agenda, although I wasn't really conscious of this. But again, that agenda was to protect myself from being hurt while getting as much as I could from the other person. And also, this thing of, and here's the thing, guys, I must have very low self-esteem or feel really badly about myself if I have to go to somebody else who I think is special, who I think is attractive, or who I think is whatever. If I have to go to them for my sense of self, if I have to go to them in that situation for my self-esteem, to feel good about myself, that's in my book, in my experience, that's a recipe for disaster. So, and I've talked a lot about codependency, and this, for me, is part of the umbrella of codependency in my relationships, giving away my power to decide how I feel about myself, wanting other people to like me so I can feel good about myself, feeling like I have to be needed in the relationship in order to be acceptable to the other person or to be in the relationship, and then controlling and manipulating when things aren't going my way. Pia Melody, who writes a lot about codependency, she says codependence is the disease of immaturity. And everything that I just described, for me, seems like a very immature person, an immature personality, somebody who doesn't have a strong sense of themselves. Now, again, the good news is I don't do this much at all, really. I mean, part of it is I haven't been in a relationship in a while, which is a whole other story. But I have seen very clearly now how none of that works. And so I am different in my relationships. As I said, I feel differently about myself today. I have more self-esteem. I'm able to be in situations where somebody may not like me and still feel good about myself. I'm able to be in a situation where somebody's unhappy with me because I didn't do something the way they wanted me to do it. And I can still feel good about myself. I can still feel okay. I don't have to feel that sense of dread or that sense of fear. Remember, 2 weeks ago, we talked about fear of shame. And fear of shame, I mean, that, for me at least, that was a driving force in many of my relationships and many of the situations that I found myself. Always afraid of being found out that I wasn't good enough. Being told that there was something about me that was not okay. Feeling ashamed, feeling humiliated because I made a mistake or I didn't do something right or I disappointed somebody. That was a huge issue for me for years. I was terrified. I didn't want to disappoint somebody. And so I did all kinds of things, and I always ended up disappointing them anyway, which I guess was not so ironic when I look back on how I was doing things. But so all of that stuff, for me, falls under this category of fear, and in particular, fear of shame, fear of not being good enough. And it all comes back to who I think I am. It all comes back to how I see myself. It all comes back to that self-image that I adopted as a 6-year-old, which says I'm not lovable, I disappoint people, I'm upsetting to people, people are not going to like me, and when they find out, it's going to be painful, and I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. Somebody's going to tell me I'm bad or I'm wrong, and I'm not going to be able to protect myself. So when you got all that going on, it's really hard to have true intimacy in your relationships. So let's stop there. If you're new, I'm going to play a song now. This is Love My Life by Robbie Williams. We're going to take a 5-minute break. The lyrics will be on screen, so feel free to sing along. And then when we come back, let's look at the assignment for tonight. This was tonight's assignment. And this kind of relates to a lot of what I was talking about. In our close personal relationships, no one can love us if we don't love ourselves, and no one can hurt us if we do. Do you agree or disagree, and why? So we'll come back to that after the break, and you guys will have a chance to share and all that stuff. All right, guys, so we're back, and I have to say this is a difficult topic for me. I've had a lot of heartache, a lot of heartache, challenges, and as perhaps you didn't, as if you didn't notice, in a lot of my romantic, intimate relationships. So This is tough. I'm definitely not the relationship expert. Honestly, when I started writing this book, this was not even going to be part of it. I don't know where it came from. It just kind of came out. But looking back now and looking at how I did relationships and how I see other people doing relationships, I think that there may be something here for people. So take what you like and leave the rest. So let's jump in with our assignment again for tonight. In our close personal relationships, no one can love us if we don't love ourselves, and no one can hurt us if we do. Who wants to take a stab at that? Laura?
Oh, okay.
Or Judy? I don't know, I can't tell.
Judy
Go ahead, Laura.
first, and then I'll come back. Thank you. Hi, Judy. Yeah.
Laura. No, all I was going to say is, hi, it's nice to see you. Nice to see you, Peter, and everybody else. I had to present a coin to somebody tonight, to my son, actually.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's why I was late. But I do believe that I don't think anybody can love me unless I love myself. I can't. What's the first one? I can't love somebody unless I love myself. Is that it?
Well, no one can love us if we don't love ourselves.
Right. I think it's all a lot of truth. I do better at that part than the other part, is what I wanted to say. If I don't love myself, I can't give what I need to give to anyone else, because it would be coming from a place of dishonesty, I guess, so to speak, uncomfortableness. But it's hard, it's taken me a long time to like myself and love myself, and I'm not perfect about that, but I do feel my relationships are so much better because as I've grown into that, then my relationships grow too. So, and the other part, I did really like your forgiving and your forgetting. I actually like that a lot, Peter. I thought that was pretty clever. And, you can't, for me, a relationship is 50-50, like with my husband, let's say. And what I mean by that is there are some decisions that can't be 50-50. The decisions themselves, like either you're going to buy something or you're not going to buy something is what I'm like. It is a simple example. Okay. But it has to be 50-50 where he gets his way 50% of the time and I get my way 50% of the time, or I don't think we'd still be together. And it's almost 40 years, and the good news is, okay, because you never know when you're going to meet the right person, or, and I didn't think I'd ever find anybody, but the fact I just said, my son asked me to give me his coin. That's the gift of being able to give and to get. For me, if my grown-up children like want me in their lives, like somewhere I've done something right, and that has to do with loving them too and accepting them for who they are and keeping my mouth shut, because they're grown-ups, and so I don't know, that just made me think of that, because it's really a special thing in my life that I have relationships with both of my children and they want me in their lives. And like, I think that's because of the love that my husband and I have had for each other, and the giving and the taking. So, and the getting and the forgiving and the forgetting. So anyway, that's my spiel.
That's beautiful. That's great. Thank you, Judy. I'm going to let you teach the relationship workshops. Well, I'm happy. Well, no, thank you, Judy. I really do appreciate what you had to say. And that is a testament more than anything else. The longevity of a relationship as well as the relationship with your adult children. That's great. Really good. All right. Laura, you wanted to speak?
I'll give it a try. Good to see you tonight. Thank you. I came on a little late, and Judy and everybody, Cindy. Judy and Cindy both probably get because I don't know everybody else. But certainly you do get the relationship trophy. And that's quite an accomplishment. On the other hand, this has been an area, I think they say in program that it all shows up in our relationships, meaning all the stuff, all the behavioral stuff. So but sticking to your homework assignment or your assignment for this evening, yes, if I love myself, if I don't love myself, no one can love me. That I get, that I agree. But if I love myself, no one can hurt me. That's a little hard. If I love myself, part of being vulnerable and in a relationship, whether it's a child or the nature of the relationship, we're not discussing, obviously, but I would still feel hurt. I might not interpret it as long, I might not linger with it, but somebody could still hurt me even if I love myself. That part I just didn't quite agree or get, rather. Oh, I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm sorry. But I'm going to mute. But
Very good.
if I love myself, that I could still be hurt. I could still identify a feeling of being disappointed or hurt that this isn't working. Okay, I'm not going to go on and on. Thank you.
All right. Well, all right. So first of all, there's no right or wrong with this. All right. So, and everybody's experience is going to be a little different. Where I was coming from with the notion that if when I love myself, nobody can hurt me, it's not to say that I won't be disappointed or sad if a relationship ends. But the thing that I noticed for me was the feelings of hurt came from the sense that I wasn't lovable, that there was something about me that was not okay. See, it's one thing, I talk about this later in the chapter, I think. We normally will feel sadness, we'll feel grief at the loss of a relationship, anything, the loss of anything, but especially a relationship. But then when I go further with it and I become depressed or self-pity or angry or vengeful and emotionally hurt in that way, for me at least, I notice that when I love myself, it doesn't really matter what somebody else thinks of me. And I may be disappointed that the relationship is over or whatever, but I don't have it's not the same thing for me as it used to be. It's not like I don't have that feeling of unworthiness, and that feeling that I must be unlovable. There's something about me that's not okay because they rejected me. And I could just say this, this even goes to my art, my fine art photography and all of that. I've really gotten to the point in my career where I don't care what people think of my work, because I know there are going to be people who love it and there are going to be people who don't love it, and most people are going to be in the middle and not really give a crap either way. So worrying about that, worrying about what do they think about me, are they going to like me, do they like me? That's kind of what I was talking about there. So if I love myself, it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks of me. And there's a lot of freedom in that. And I forget who it was. It might have been Jean-Paul Sartre or there's some philosopher who said, and I'm going to botch this, but it was something like, true freedom is being free of the good opinion of other people. So when I don't care what anybody else thinks about me, now again, this is not, not being sociopathic or psychopathic or whatever. I'm not talking about, that, but when I'm not overly concerned, then I don't have the same feeling of hurt. Again, I might be sad, I might be disappointed, I might be surprised, and I may want to have a dialogue and say, gee, what happened? I thought things were going well, or, what happened, is there anything I can do? But but it's a whole different experience now. And that's what I was talking about, the disease of immaturity. You know, I can see it I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, and when they're really little, you know, they're really, you know, we just want to be loved, and we just want to be told that we're okay and that we're lovable. And if I think somebody, if I'm in that place and I think somebody doesn't like me, then I don't feel good about myself. And that's a problem for me. So that's what I was talking about with that. So thank you, Laura. You want to say anything else about that? You're good. Okay. Who else?
Hi.
Kim.
How are you?
Good. What do you got?
Well, I've been having some shifts, and what I've noticed, I was very preoccupied with, you know, what people were thinking about me and how this and that went. And the past couple of days, I'm just not, the way it's happening, what I'm noticing just in this talking and thinking about it is I'm just not thinking about it so much. I'm not wondering what people are thinking. And I'm not wondering if, you know, how something I said affected someone. I assume that has to do with I'm feeling better about myself. Is that kind of what, but that's just what I'm noticing the shift is in me. And it's a huge relief. I hadn't really thought of what a relief it is until we started talking about this, but it's just been so much more peaceful in my mind since that. But thank you.
That's great. Great. So later in the chapter, it's not my original quote, but I have in there the little saying you guys might have heard, which is, what other people think of me is none of my business. You know, and I had to go so far as to say what I think of me is none of my business, because I had such a negative view of myself. So now again, here's the thing. Nobody makes us think, feel, say, or do anything. You know, that's that, and when we recognize that, and when we consciously and deliberately choose what we're going to think, what we're going to feel, what we're going to say, and what we're going to do, we're embracing our true power. And when we're in our true power, we can create our lives. Now again, you know, if I'm working for a client and the client is unhappy with my work, or even with me personally, you know, it's not like I'm not dismissing that. I'm not saying, you know, they're a jerk or whatever. It probably behooves me to have a conversation and say, gee, what, you know, is there something, an adjustment that we need to make or whatever? I think it's helpful to be responsive in a situation like that. But the point is, I don't have to feel bad about myself if I think somebody else is unhappy with me. And then it just becomes an inquiry. It becomes an education. It becomes, you know, seeing the situation from somebody else's point of view, which, you know, can be very helpful. And but I can only do that when I love myself. See, if I think I'm a piece of garbage or whatever, then I can't have that conversation, because I'm going to interpret it as more proof of my unworthiness. I'm going to interpret it as they're just a jerk and I don't ever want to deal with them again. And I may be missing out on an important learning opportunity, an important relationship down the road. So we don't want to give our power away, but we still want to participate in the relationship and ask questions, listen to somebody else's point of view about things, because I'm not perfect and maybe I could improve in certain ways. So I'm not suggesting that we just dismiss all of that. But I am saying that for me at least, I have to stop giving my power away in those situations and feel bad about myself and then feel resentful and all the other stuff that I used to do a lot, that I don't really do as much anymore. So that's what I'm talking about. All right, great, Kim, thank you. Who else? I hear somebody.
It's Dee Dee.
Hey,
Hi.
Dee Dee.
Thanks, everybody. Wow, what a topic. Everybody that's willing to broach this, thank you for your courage. The thought that I had is, people might try to love me, but if I don't love myself, I certainly wouldn't be able to receive that love, because I can't even receive my own love when I'm mad or hating myself for any reason. But I think what I want to say, I've known that there was an underlying self-loathing issue, and I've made a lot of progress. And by looking at this material week in and week out at such a deep level, I'm noticing that I'm a prime candidate for all of those tools, Peter, that you suggested that we use. The affirmations, the mind movie. I can't wait to have my own mind movie. A vision board. I feel pretty strongly that I have, what I need in that regard. But even more important, more than that, I'm going to get accountability people, so that I'm just not relying on my own motivation, my own acknowledgement. I really need to work with other people on this, because it's such a huge opportunity for really big growth in a kind of a fast clip. We are moving fast. If you consider the depth of the material that you're covering, that's lifetime material, and we're really moving through the deep stuff. So learning how to love myself. I did survive the computer guy. We had another go around. I lost 2 full days from fear and upsetness from being what I would call, I felt victimized. I really did. And we're not done talking, but I do have a functioning computer. I'm not full on with it, but I was able to say, instead of you bleep, 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 I was able to say, I don't trust. And I think that was huge in getting, I think that he heard that. And at the end of the day, we weren't, and I also said, I don't think you're trying to hurt me. It just happens to be the way that they do business. It's not a good match for me. Anyway, so, I'm going to keep coming back, because I need these skills. Thank you very much, Peter. And I love all of you guys.
That's great. Thank you, Dee Dee. Awesome. I love it. So 3 things came up for me. So one is having an action partner, somebody that you work with on this stuff. That was helpful for me at all different points in my recovery and my journey, and the stuff I did with my photography business. I had somebody I spoke to every morning, and I was accountable to them, and they were accountable to me, and we supported each other in pursuing our goals. I've obviously worked with people in recovery programs and all of that. So don't try to do any of this. See, here's the thing. Nobody can do it for us, but we don't have to do it alone. So get help, find somebody to work with. I know, Dee Dee, I think you're working with somebody through the book. A few of you guys are working with a partner in the book. I love that. That's great. Doesn't have to be somebody in this group. If you have somebody you trust, somebody that you can connect with in that regard. Number 2, again, I love what I heard in Dee Dee's share, that when I can admit, my interpretation of what happened was, when I can admit that I'm afraid, and I said this last week, as opposed to I'm angry, I come across very differently in the relationship. And when I come across that I'm angry at you and it's your fault that I feel the way I feel, the other person gets defensive and then they respond. I say this in the book, anger begets anger, defensiveness begets defensiveness. But if I can go to them and say, look, I'm concerned, I don't understand, I need your help. Help me to understand, or, I'm concerned about this, or I don't trust, without blaming them for that, then all of a sudden that could open up doors. Now, again, they may not be the right fit. Actually, it sounds like, Dee Dee, you decided they weren't the right fit for you. That's okay. Not everybody's going to be the right fit for us. All I'm saying is we can approach those relationships differently. And it all comes down to how I see myself. If I think I can take care of myself in those difficult, challenging relationships, I'm going to come across one way. If I still see myself as that little 6-year-old who couldn't take care of himself, who didn't know how to have boundaries, who felt terrible about himself, I'm going to have a different experience in that relationship. And then the third thing, this was not directly related to Dee Dee's share, but just something that has come up a couple of times. If I don't love myself, then I'm going to put all kinds of pressure on the other person to love me so I can feel good about myself. And I have to say, for most of my life, in my romantic, but also my work relationships, I just wanted somebody to tell me that I was okay, because I was so sure that I wasn't okay. So, but the problem is that puts a lot of pressure on the other person. It's not their job to tell me that I'm okay. It's not their job to emotionally caretake me. And that puts all kinds of pressure, and then, I can come across as needy, and then that could put up some walls with the other person. So part of this, a lot of this for me is, loving myself means I let somebody else off the hook. It's not their job to love me. It's not their job to tell me I'm okay. It's not their job to esteem me. I mentioned in the audiobook, I personally believe you cannot overesteem a child. You can wrongly esteem a child, but you can't overesteem a child if it's healthy esteem. And I'm not a parent, and I'm not really into what's going on in the world of parenting and all that. But I know, I've heard that there is some people who feel we're overesteeming our children by giving them trophies and all this other stuff. And my thought is you can never overesteem a child as long as it's healthy, appropriate esteem, because then what happens when they become an adult, they're not looking for somebody else to esteem them. They're not looking for somebody else to tell them that they're okay. They bring that into their relationships. Imagine if everybody brought into their personal relationships, but also into their work relationships, into their social relationships, this sense that they were good enough, that they were okay, that they were lovable. That would change the dynamic in so many relationships. So giving that to our children in a healthy way, those are the kids that are going to do great things in the world. They're not that sense of entitlement that a lot of kids seem to have these days. I don't think it's because they got too much esteem. Again, I'm not a parent. I'm going to stop after this, but I will say I think, it's the sense that they're lovable, and they drink that in. That becomes, when we're children, we take everything in. It becomes the hardwiring. It becomes the neural networks in our brain. So if the neural network is, I'm good, I'm valuable, I'm worthy, people like me, I'm likable, I'm lovable, those are tough. It's tough to break that kind of neural connection. And, the good news is a lot of parents today, I think, are more conscious of that, and they're more deliberate in how they speak to their children, and they're more conscious about the messages they send, because a lot of it is nonverbal. I used to come home from school, and I was often, instead of greeted with a smile, I was greeted with a frown, because now the responsibility started again. Somebody had to take care of me and was worried about my needs and all this other stuff. Not by a bad parent, not by an unloving parent, but that's a nonverbal message that got hardwired in my brain, that people are disappointed when they see me, they're upset when they see me, that kind of thing. Walking around with that programming without being aware that that's what's running my life created a lot of problems for me. And I want to save other people that misery, So that's why I'm sharing all of this, and that's why I wrote this book. It's like, because a lot of people don't talk about this. I appreciate what Dee Dee was just saying about how deep we're going. I don't hear a lot of, and I've done a lot of stuff over the years. So, I come across, I think, I don't know how I come across, and it doesn't matter. So that's what I'm talking about. That's kind of the message for today. We have a few more minutes. Who else? Who wants to chime in on all that?
Yeah, Peter, thank you so much for your share. I really appreciate
This is
it.
Helena.
I like to share for just a few minutes, maybe a minute or something. I can so like I appreciate that because I really needed to hear that. Because recently I had this incident where I work on money, 12 steps, and I have a sponsor, very, very nice sponsor. And, I was working on some spiritual recovery of the, based on this, some literature. And, it's like, I also been in a Coda recovery for a long time and I can thank enough. And, also like your, this, like your book, and all that is really powerful. But I was also feeling really like, I don't know. I was having this trigger, from this person, and I'm so not good at listening to my like the body signals, that gives me like this comforting and something's triggering, and but I'm not able to like express it in a way that is not really offensive. I just usually ignore. I've been always ignoring in this the signs that I get from my body, and. One of the reasons that I got really uncomfortable is because I felt that this person was being a little bit way too controlling. And, I didn't like that because in my recovery, I came in a long way to not to try to control others, but I also don't want to be controlled by other people and I don't want to be micromanaged. And yeah, just like you said, I really feel that um, I can approach in a different way by just saying, it's not your job. I think I could say this today. Like, it's not your job to try to care for my feelings, caring for my feeling is my job. It's not your job. I think this is what I'm going to say to this person today. And I'm just so appreciative of what you just explained. Um, yeah, because I felt that my boundary was being not attacked, but I felt like my personal boundary was being um, if you do this, or if you get angry, if you get upset, but then if we have a set time for 50 minutes to do this work, like what are you going to do? And I felt like this person wasn't really respecting me. I felt like I was being disrespected. So I can say today in a healthy way that it's not your job to try to take care of me and care for my emotion. Your job is just to help me to get through the step work, and that's it. So that's what I can do. So I really want to say thank you. Very glad that I came here.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Helena. That was great. I hope you guys can still see me. My internet dropped or something happened, but I think I'm still here. I can see you guys. So, Helena, that's great. Thank you. Again, we're not saying other people don't do things inappropriately. We're not saying other people are not unloving. We're not saying other people are not controlling. I mean, I know a lot of controlling people in my life, and I've been a controlling person in those in certain relationships. So. We're not making excuses for somebody else's inappropriate behavior. I love, though, what I heard is that you're at a place where you feel like you can take care of yourself and you can say in a loving way, hey, it's not your job to caretake me and I can take care of myself. And you may want, if it's appropriate, this is what would work for me going forward. I've had that conversation with sponsees. I haven't had that conversation with a sponsor, but I've had that conversation with sponsees. This is what would work for me going forward. How do you feel about this? And we adjust the relationship. And that's just negotiating. As I said last week, adults negotiate. Children yell and scream and throw things. And not every relationship is going to work out. Not every relationship is going to be forever. Again, especially in recovery programs, we're all there for a reason, and relationships can be challenging on both sides. So that's great. Thank you, Helena. Thank you for sharing all that. Anybody else? Got a few more minutes? In our close personal relationships, No one can love us if we don't love ourselves, and no one can hurt us if we do. Anybody else want to chime in on that? All right, so it's almost time to wrap anyway. So I'm going to play the song again. It's 3.5 minutes this time, so just watch the lyrics on screen, sing along. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube or on my website after the fact, I can't actually play the song online because of copyright issues. The song is Love My Life by Robbie Williams, and it has a lot of great, positive, life-affirming, self-affirming affirmations in it. It's a great song just to kind of walk around the house singing to yourself. And all of this is about reprogramming. Reprogramming the negative messages that we got, the misinterpretations, because, the last thing I'll say is, the person, when I came home from school, I was probably misinterpreting the messages I was receiving because I was a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, and I was probably misinterpreting those messages, and I took that in based on my own interpretations. And so I know that person in particular loved me very much, and wanted the best for me, and really sacrificed a lot and really took great care of me in many other ways. So it was the mind of a 6-year-old that misinterpreted all of that stuff, and then that all went in, and then I came up with this idea about myself, this self-image, this self-concept, and that ran my life for 40 years without me being aware that that's what was running my life. So that's why I keep harping on this. Who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? Is that really true? Question all those negative thoughts and beliefs. And if it happens after the fact, do what we talk about, which is work backwards. So I had a situation day before yesterday, and in the moment, I wasn't able to bring a lot of awareness or whatever to the situation. But afterwards, I could look back and say, gee, how must I have seen myself in that situation to react the way that I did? And is that really true about me? And can I change that? And do I need to make an amends to another person? Do I need to go back to them and have a conversation and apologize for my part and all of that? So that's what we're talking about. And as Dee Dee said, if you go back to some of the earlier workshops, the first month or two, I talked a lot about 5 different tools that we can use to reprogram: affirmations, vision statement, guided visualizations, vision board, and mind movie. And the mind movie is actually the website www.mindmovie.com. And I actually played my mind movie on the workshop, so I don't remember what week it was, but if you go back, you might see that. Anyway, so that's it. Anybody want to say anything, or I'm going to play the song?
No, Peter, I just forgot to, I'm here, want to say hi, and I agree with you. You asked, the assignment was, do you agree or disagree? I agree. You have to love
Great.
yourself, and it's something you have to work on all the time. Yeah. So it does seem like, it's just something, it's reprogramming. Why not bring it back to yourself than putting it out there to somebody else?
And as we accept ourselves, we tend to be more accepting of other people.
Yes.
And we have more tolerance for the more I tolerate my imperfections, my shortcomings, the more I can tolerate somebody else's. Now, again, none of this is about making excuses for somebody who's really acting inappropriately or a dangerous situation. We don't have to become a doormat for somebody else's inappropriate behavior. And the more compassionate I am with myself, the more compassionate I can be with another person. All right, good. Thank you, Barb.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right. So I'm going to play the song. We'll come back and say our final goodbyes. All right, guys. So that's it for tonight. Anybody want to say anything before we go? Anything about
Just a
anything?
big thank you. Thanks everybody. Really appreciate everybody's courage. It's huge. It's very inspiring.
Thank you,
Good
Dee
night.
Dee.
Mhm.
Appreciate your courage.
Thanks, Peter.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Peter.
All right. So be bigger this week. Be bigger than you think you are in everything you do, because next week I want to hear about all your victories. All right. Judy, you want to say something?
Nope, just thanks.
Okay. All
Glad I
right. You're
could make
welcome.
it.
Have a great week, guys.
All right. It was a great night. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Barb.